welcome back to the latest ball-breaking episode of ACDC Beyond the Thunder podcast. With your thunderous hosts, Kurt Squires, Greg Ferguson, and Eric Cube. Are you ready?
G'day, ladies and gents. ACDC Beyond the Thunder is going down under for a historic episode honoring the band's 50th anniversary. That's right, on December 31st, 1973, ACDC took the stage for the very first time in Sydney, Australia. And today's guest was there when it all began. Welcome to the show that showcases the influence that ACDC has had on our culture, from well-known artists to astronauts, comedians to cartoonists, even rappers to professional race car drivers. But in this case, a secretary turned CEO. I'm your host, Kurt Squires, and I'm so glad to be joined at the hip with engineer Eric Kielb, sitting right over there, and my Thunder brother from another mother over there, Greg Ferguson.
Hey, Kurt and Eric. Well, this guest has been a long time coming, and it's someone who our listeners have been requesting since we started this podcast 5 years ago.
5 years ago, man. Unbelievable. And 15, if you count when we set out to make ACDC Beyond the Thunder, the documentary, Greg. Can you believe that?
No. What the hell are we doing? Come on. 15 years of our lives doing this. It's been a lot of fun though, Kurt, and I really appreciate these times that we get to spend together and talk about AC/DC.
Yes.
For this episode though, the stars have aligned. There's lots of milestones to celebrate during this episode, including the 4 decades that this amazing woman has had as a music industry consultant, a former record executive, best known for her time as a CEO of Albert Music. It's Fifa Riccobono.
Oh man, I actually went back into the archives to see what we'd first sent to FIFA as an email and try to get the band involved with our documentary. Can you guess when that was?
No, I mean 10 years ago?
It was 2010.
Wow.
I was reading through the correspondences because there's quite a few emails.
Thank God for your emails. You're relentless, for real.
I know. I learned from the best, which is FIFA. That was FIFA's job. But it's so sad, the pleading and the begging, trying to get this documentary off the ground. Such a cool flashback, but painfully wonderful. And it showcased just how compassionate and honest she was with us. She wanted to help us, but she's a gatekeeper, man. That's what she does.
She truly is the gatekeeper of all things AC/DC, and the memories and the experiences that she's had, not just with AC/DC, but with many of the other successful bands that came out of the Alberts. It's astounding. She's a pioneer in Australian rock and roll and the world of music, really. She was there at the very start, and I can't wait to hear some of the stories that she has to share with us today.
Okay, let's do that. Today, we dive into the heart and soul of Australian rock and roll history, honoring a true legend with over 40 years in the industry, who was CEO of Albert Music and the driving force behind the scenes, launching the careers of many iconic artists. Get ready for a trip down AC/DC lane with a woman who not only witnessed the band's history, but played a significant role in shaping it. AC/DC Beyond the Thunder serves up a warm welcome to Fifa Riccobono.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Fifa.
Welcome.
I feel like we're talking to AC/DC royalty here, a true member of the AC/DC family.
Well, I've been part of their journey. I wouldn't say that I shaped their career. I mean, those guys knew exactly what they were doing and what they wanted, and they had a powerful team behind them in Vander and Young. I had the pleasure of being able to work with them right from the outset. You know, those guys knew what they wanted to do, especially Malcolm and Angus. I mean, they had a vision.
And Albert, it sounds like, was a real family. Speaking of family, I wanted to ask about, you were just 4 years old when you came over from Sicily with your family to Australia, and your given birth name is not, in fact, FIFA, but what is it? Can you tell listeners?
It's Crocevista.
Ah, that's nice.
If you can say it, it's nice. But that was my grandmother's name, and she also had a nickname, and her nickname was FIFA. So I actually got both. I got her real name and her nickname. But when I came to Australia at school, the first person that tried to pronounce my name came out with Cocker Fisher, which sounded faulty. And so I immediately went straight to FIFA, and I've been FIFA ever since.
Nice. You didn't speak a word of English when you arrived, but how did the native Australians treat your family as newcomers to the land down under?
It was difficult. It's really strange. If you talk to people on a one-on-one basis, they're actually quite lovely.
Yeah.
And we did make some really, really strong friendships with some families. But in general, we were one of the first Italians in our area. So they didn't take to us very much. And we didn't speak English. None of us did. My dad spoke a little bit because he'd come out to Australia a little bit beforehand, so he could afford to earn some money to pay for our trips out here. And he spoke a little, but I spoke nothing. My brother didn't, and nor did my mum. My mum was only in Australia for 7 days, and she was already working in a factory.
Wow.
To try and, keep family afloat, because we came out literally with the clothes on our back. And when I was at school, I found it really difficult because like 3 weeks earlier, I had a whole family. I had grandparents, I had great grandparents, I had cousins, I had aunties. And then 3 weeks later, I've got no one.
Wow.
Not only do I have no one, but I don't speak the language. So I go to school, a foreign school, people around me that don't really want to know me because they can't speak to me and I can't speak to them. So I found it really hard. And I haven't mentioned this before, but I had this wonderful nun who took me under her wing, and she knew how difficult it was for me. And every lunchtime, all the kids would go out and play, but I'd sit with her. And she would teach me, and she taught me how to speak English.
Wow.
And so within 12 months, I could actually speak English and I could actually start writing. And I was doing extremely well, but they had to take me out of school because we were moving suburbs. We were going to another area. And she cried. She begged my mother to leave me there because she said I was doing so well that I had to go. But she gave me I think that she formed, the foundation for me to be able to move ahead and to actually go into school the next time round with a little bit of knowledge. And so it wasn't as difficult when I changed schools. And we all eventually, start speaking. But we were one of the very first families in the area, so it was very, very hard. But we got through.
That's amazing that it's those key people in your life that form who you are, and that would obviously be one of the first for you.
I cannot tell you what that meant to me at the time to actually have someone who was there almost solely for me. I mean, she went out of her way to have me there and to help me through that year. And that was the foundation of my education.
Wow. Speaking of influential people, when J. Albert and Sons Ted Albert founded Albert Productions, which was a record label branch of his father's business devoted to signing and recording Australian pop artists, the second band they ever signed was the Easy Beats, and that featured Angus and Malcolm's older brother, George, who you were a massive fan of, right?
Correct. I was at school and I was too young to go and see them, but the two bands that I liked at the time were Billy Thorpe and the Aztecs and the Easy Beats, who, unbeknownst to me, were both signed by Ted Albert. I got myself out of school and then realised that I really didn't have anything to go to. And my parents, they said, well, what do you want to do? And so they put me through business college. It was very expensive, but they still did it.
Wow.
And at the end of it, I was qualified to be a secretary. I was going to look for a job, because I wanted to have a break after business college, but my mum had found this ad because she knew I was going to look for something in the city. And I didn't want to go because I wanted to have a break, but I thought, okay, I went in for this interview and there were quite a few people. And I still didn't know anything about the company.
Yeah.
Didn't know anything about what they did. The ad just said, meet the stars.
Catchy.
As it turned out, I got the job.
Wow.
If you get the job, can you start straight away? And I just thought, I was hesitating and I thought, this might be an opportunity. So I said, yeah, of course I can. And so as I was getting in the elevator and the elevator door was closing, he said, I'll see you on Monday.
Wow.
Left school on the Thursday, got the interview on the Friday and started work on the Monday. So much for my 2-week break. And I still didn't know anything about the company.
Unbelievable.
I knew it was a music company, but it meant nothing to me. The Easy Beats grew so fast in Australia. They were just phenomenal. They had the same fan base that the Beatles had. They would have 10,000 people meet them at the airport.
Amazing.
Did I ever in my wildest dreams believe that I'd sit there with George and Harry, the Easy Beats. It was, again, almost overwhelming to be there, right at the first steps.
Yeah.
It was a dream come true.
Wow.
So you went from being a secretary to promotions to A&R and label manager to eventually general manager. And while rising through the ranks, you were considered one tough cookie, I heard, even being called a ball breaker by Molly Meldrum. What's so tough about you, FIFA?
Oh,
You're always smiling.
I always had a lot of confidence in knowing that I had Ted Albert's backing and I had George and Harry's backing. So I could go out and be as fierce as I wanted.
I love that. You said the Easy Beats broke up. They come back to England. They're a little disillusioned by success and eventually disbanding. But George and Harry rolled up their sleeves and they began writing and producing for an array of artists such as John Paul Young, Ted Mullery, Stevie Wright, the Angels, Rose Tattoo. Those guys were a machine.
Oh, they were unstoppable in the 70s. Unstoppable.
Yeah.
What happened was their relationship fell apart with the Easy Beats when they disbanded, but they kept the relationship with Ted. And so they kept writing songs, and they were in the UK, and they were really right in the midst of everything that was happening in the UK at that time, which it was the real hubbub of everything. So they would send songs back to Ted, and Ted would say, oh, okay, I've got someone for this. So Ted Mullery, Falling in Love Again. John Paul Young, Pasadena. They kept the songwriting going and sending it over to Ted while they were still in the UK. So when they came back, it was like, okay, this is going to be a partnership now, a real partnership between Ted and George and Harry. Ted set up the company as Albert Productions. He put the studios together. They wanted to create a label that they chose the artists they felt would work the best. And they always looked for motivated people who, would give their all and, ended up with an amazing roster.
Well, one day Ted came over to the Youngs household and noticed George's two younger brothers, Angus and Malcolm, both playing guitars in their bedroom. And he told their father that if they ever wanted to do anything, to send them to me. And did you ever get to meet Angus and Malcolm's mom and dad?
Oh, yeah, I used to go over to Burwood quite a lot, which is where they live. Around 76, 77, 78, I spent a lot of time. I was very close friends with their older sister, Margaret.
Yes.
And her husband and their son, Sam, who ended up becoming one of our engineers.
Yes.
And, he's really like the keeper of all things ACDC now.
That's amazing.
So I had a lovely relationship with the whole family.
That's nice. And that opportunity came in the form of the Marcus Hook Roll Band, the first time Angus and Malcolm were ever captured on record, a project put together by their older brother, George. I had listened to one of the tracks, Quick Reaction, which is basically a blueprint for TNT if you listen to it carefully.
I'll have to go back and listen to it.
You mentioned Margaret. I wanted to bring Margaret up, another very influential female in AC/DC's origin story. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it was Margaret who not only brought Little Angus to all the amazing rock shows when he was a kid that inspired him, but also came up with the band's name and Angus wearing the iconic schoolboy uniform, right?
Well, I don't know about taking him to shows because that was well before my time, but I know that she was the one that really had the musical influence because she loved all the, Jerry Lee Lewis, Elvis Presley, all that era that she was very fond of, and she brought that into the house, because there was an older brother, Alex, he played sax, and he was also in a band called Grapefruit.
Yeah.
And he was in the UK, and I worked with Alex quite a lot as well. They brought all of those influences into the family. And Margaret definitely did schoolboy uniform and all of that. She was definitely part of that. But they really looked up to their sister. I mean, she was so much older. She was almost a mother. Well, she was really a mother figure to them more than a sister.
I bet.
And her son was only 2 years difference between him and her brothers.
Wow.
So all the young ones, grew up together. But Margaret was really, like I said, she was more a mother than a sister. She was a lovely lady, a really lovely lady.
She sounds like it. That's what happens with big families. They become almost like a dad or a mom when you get down to the youngest,
Yeah, well, there were 8 and she was the oldest. Angus was the youngest, with Malcolm just not that far behind.
Well, as we know, Angus and Malcolm eventually formed ACDC, and their first official gig was at Checkers nightclub in Sydney on December 31st, 1973, 50 years ago this month.
Coming right up.
Unbelievable. Were you there?
No.
Okay.
I wasn't there. I knew Checkers well, and I did go and see them at Checkers many times.
Okay.
After that, but no, I wasn't at that show.
And that was featuring Dave Evans on vocals, and eventually, as we know, Dave was replaced by Bon in 74, and you were asked to attend the first gig that Bon ever played with AC/DC at is it the Rockdale Masonic Hall? Is that right?
It was the Rockdale Masonic Hall.
Okay.
I lived only about 6 streets away from it, and I was going home from work, and George and Harry said, they couldn't get to the gig. Would I be able to go to the gig? And I said, sure, it was on the way home, and I'd do it. Rockdale Masonic Hall was absolutely jam-packed to the raft.
Wow.
The show starts, and it's brilliant. He comes out. He's got a tooth missing. He's got a sharp tooth around his neck. Wearing the most, skin-tight sort of satin, all in one. And I just looked at him. I thought, you've got to be kidding. And he starts singing, and he's right there. I mean, he's right there from the outset. He didn't know all the words, but, got through it all and was, for me, at that period in my life, I thought he was really crass. I thought he was really, but there was something about it. You couldn't take your eyes off him because he was very charismatic.
Yeah.
It really felt, without doubt, that it was a unit. It really felt like he was always there. It didn't feel like he was just there, on his first gig or auditioning. Not at all. But I walked away and I thought, I don't know how I feel about it because it's so hard. You've gone from someone who is a glamour reckless in Dave to someone who's like this hard rocker, but still dressed in this, pink satin one piece, but very different effect to the other guy. And I've said it before, but I was leaving, and the manager at the time said, well, aren't you going to come back and say hello? And I thought, well, I better do that because I told George and Harry I was coming.
Yeah.
And I went back, and I was so glad that I did, because had I not gone back and spoken to him, I would have gone back to George and Harry with a totally different view.
Right.
It was just so charming. He picked up my hand.
Wow.
Really friendly, and, glad that I could come and everything. So I walked away and I thought, he's nice. He's quite nice. So I went back the next day, and I said to George and Harry, I thought he was really good. I thought he was rude. And I was really prudish back then anyway. And I said, he really fit. And that was the beginning of a really lovely friendship with Bon.
That's great.
He was just gorgeous. I had such a lovely time with him for years that I knew him.
She's got taste, my lady. Get a nice face, my lady. Makes my heart race every time she sits on my face. Yeah, she got my lady. What's a girl, my lady? Around the floor.
He seemed like a very complicated fellow, like you said, just like peeling back an onion. There's a lot of layers there. Did you ever get in a heated argument with Bon?
Yeah, yeah. He was rude to me once, and I just walked away from him, and I thought, no, not doing that. I walked out of my office, and I was really not pleased. It wasn't really horrible. He just was being narky.
Yeah.
And I thought, no, that's not right. And I walked out. And when I came back, my desk was full of flowers.
Classic Bon.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, in the early days, your task was getting the artist's music on the radio, TV, concerts, and you were really known for your guerrilla grassroots style, showing up at radio stations in the middle of nowhere with all these promotional materials. What was some of your favorite earliest AC/DC promo ideas that you can remember?
I think my strength was I was good at networking. I'm a people person anyway. I really love meeting people. And if I knew they were going into an area, I would paper that place, wherever it was, with the radio station, the local newspaper, the television, if there's any television there, just anybody and everybody that could be of value to the performance, when they got into town, having posters put up, doing all of that. It would even be the smallest town.
Yeah.
But I'd still do it. And the really important thing that people don't realise is, well, back then anyway, when you talk to these regional people, they love it because you've spent time with them, and a lot of people won't because they're small areas.
Sure.
Those people then came into the city and became music directors in the major radio stations. And I already had a relationship that went back 5 years with them,
Smart.
And the television stations and producers and the video people and all of that. It's incredible how they move around, but usually they move up.
Right.
I worked tirelessly, I have to say. I would do it 24/7 to make sure that they had their sample records, they had their posters, all of those things I would just really make sure they had. And then still with a personal phone call.
That's amazing. That reminds me of AC/DC's approach in general, just boots on the ground, just going to every dirty pub in every little town that no one had ever heard of, and then slowly just building a base. And, that started with promotions too. So that's amazing.
Yeah, and they were all, Bon was always good to interview anyway.
Yeah.
He was always so tongue-in-cheek, one-liners, and he was the older one in the group, and he'd already been in band, so he brought a lot of experience. He had so much respect for Malcolm and Angus's, ability.
Yeah.
But he also brought in another element. He used to always say, don't do what I do, because he was a bit of a character. But his experience in other bands and his experience on the road, which had been a lot longer than theirs, was...
Right. We wondered if you wouldn't mind playing a little speed round name game with us. We'll mention a member of the AC/DC family, and you have to try to condense down their personality in one sentence. Do you think you could play?
All right. I'll pull out if I can't.
All right, let's see how you do. And maybe even a little known fact about each instead, whatever you want to do. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Cliff Williams.
Well, he was a pretty boy in the band, but also the sweetheart.
The pretty boy. I love it. Phil Rudd.
Oh, Phil's a character. I love Phil. Can't get out of his own way, but he's probably one of the best drummers you'll ever come across in the world.
Yeah, I think every drummer would tell you that too. He used to drive the band around, right?
He did. He was the driver. In fact, in the early days, they all were in one car, and I was in London with them, and Phil was the driver, and we drove down to this little gig at the back of nowhere, and it was the hottest day. It was 1976. It was 100 and something degrees. England had never experienced anything so hot, and there were 6 of us in the car, and I was sitting up alongside Bon. His arm was across mine, and the sweat that was pouring off him onto me, and I looked at him and I was Bon. But it was a sweat box, and Phil was driving, and we drove down to the gig, did the gig, and Phil drove back. We had one guy that was pumping gear, but Phil drove around everywhere.
Oh my gosh. Greg, you want to jump in and name someone?
How about Mark Evans?
Oh, what can I say about Mark? I enjoyed working with him when he was with us. There were difficulties, but I enjoyed working with him.
Oh, you're so diplomatic, FIFA. Okay, we'll alternate here, Greg. How about Brian Johnson?
Well, Brian's I can't do it in one sentence.
I know. How about something that little known fact about Brian?
Well, he came out to Australia in 73 as Geordie. That's where I knew him. I met him as Geordie. And then they're auditioning, and Cliff says to me, we're down to 2, and one's Brian. He didn't even say the surname. And I said, not Brian Johnson. I only knew one Brian in the world. And he said, yeah. He said, how'd you know? And I said, well, I didn't, but I know Brian. And I knew that would work.
That's pretty amazing news. So you knew Brian before ACDC or the beginning of ACDC, but you kind of influenced the decision to pick Brian.
Oh, no, not at all. No.
I thought that's what you're saying.
No, I didn't say that. I said Cliff told me that they were down to 2 people.
Oh.
And they were down to 2 people, and one of them was Brian. I didn't even get to hear who the second one was, because as soon as he said Brian, I said, not Brian Johnson.
Oh, that's too funny.
And I'm not kidding. I only knew one Brian. I didn't know any other Brians. One Brian in the world, and it was him.
That's hilarious.
Wow. Well, someone we've actually had on the podcast, Simon, right?
Well, I was with him in, I think it was 83. Was it 83 that Simon came in? I can't remember the exact date.
Yep.
But anyway, he came in and he was so new to it, so new to the game. And he was about to go and do the first show, and it's like in front of 12,000 people. And he was very nervous, and the guys were so supportive, you know. Anyway, he did his first show. Well, his little fingers were bleeding by the end of it.
Oh, man.
He didn't have blisters. He didn't have calluses on his fingers. So he was bandaged up for the shows, but he was enjoying every second of it. I enjoyed working with him, and he did put his heart and soul into those efforts, you know. And as I said, his first show, he bled.
Wow. If you want blood, he got it.
He got it.
Yes.
Oh, man. How about Chris Slade, speaking of drummers?
I didn't really get to meet Chris. I mean, I met him at shows, but I didn't have a relationship with him. I didn't know him. He's in one of the best videos there, and he comes up a lot in it.
Yes.
But no, I didn't know Chris.
Okay, fair enough.
How about Harry Vanda?
Oh, Harry, I love Harry. Love Harry. He was called the Dutch Damager for a while.
Yes.
He's one of those people that sits in the background, doesn't say very much, and can't get a rise out of him. But when you do, you don't forget it. He's a brilliant guitarist. Brilliant.
Yeah.
And how about his partner, George Young?
Oh, there aren't enough words to describe George. He was everything. He could do anything. We would have session players come in and do, you know, guitar work. He would redo them. They'd come in and do their drum sessions, and he would redo the drums. You know, he would redo the bass.
Wow.
He was such a perfectionist, and he also had perfect pitch, which is annoying to people like me. And there wasn't anything that he couldn't put his hand to. And always thinking ahead as well. I mean, he had incredible vision. He was a fabulous writer. He was a fabulous producer. If he said yes, then everybody followed. If he said no, it was left at no.
Nice.
He was really, really decisive about things. And I had a great relationship with him. With George and Harry, I mean, 40-odd years with the two of them, just exceptional.
What about Angus? Tell us something about Angus, maybe a little known fact about Angus.
Angus was as quiet as a mouse. He'd come into the studio, he'd have his chocolate milk and lollies. He loved his sweet. Very quiet. Then he'd get on that guitar, and he was a different person. He was amazing. He still is amazing. I don't think there's anyone that comes close to, you know, the alter ego that's on stage is just exceptional. Very quiet, off stage. Always has been. He just keeps to himself. He loves his own solitude and his family. He's very much a family person.
And how about older brother Malcolm?
Oh, I love Malcolm. It broke my heart when he died. Him and George, I mean, the two of them went within weeks of each other.
Yeah.
I had a great relationship with Malcolm. His wife was my secretary back in the 70s.
Oh, wow.
And we stayed friends over the years and are still very close friends. And when I'd go to London, I'd always stay with Mal and Linda. And he was another one that, you know, he was the size of sixpence, but my God, make you shake in your boots.
I bet.
I mean, when he came off stage, you could monitor what was going to happen by looking at Mal.
Wow.
If it had been a great night, everybody was like beside themselves. You looked at Mal and it hadn't been a great night, everybody would run for the hills. He was just so powerful.
Yeah.
So powerful.
Wow.
Yeah, that kind of circles us back to Bon Scott. I mean, you shared a little bit about Bon. Do you have anything else you want to add?
Oh, I love Bon. I love Bon because he was so, um, he did what he wanted to do. When he'd come into town, I'd go and pick him up. Well, all of them, I'd pick him up from the airport and I'd take him back to the hotel. And this is in the very early days where there was no money. I took him back to his room and he just paid something like $100 dollars for a bottle of scotch, some really old age scotch. And he said, "Oh, let's have a drink." And I said, "Oh no." When he told me how much it was, I thought, "No way, can't open that special occasion." And he said, "You're here, I'm here. That's a special occasion."
Ah,
That was the type of character that he was, you know. He would always send me notes and he wrote to me constantly, wherever he was. I've got postcards and letters, you know, wherever he was, he'd love to share it. He would send me postcards, and I had a wall just of postcards from Bon and letters from Bon.
nice.
And he always would say, "Oh, look, there's a friend of mine in a bit of trouble. Can you just advance some money and send some money down to them? They helped me out when I was needing this." You know, and he did that all the time.
That's really amazing.
And I knew his mum and dad pretty well too, and his brothers. That again was heartbreaking to hear when he died. And I organised his funeral with his family as well. That was just heartbreaking.
Right.
Heartbreaking.
That's a huge daunting task for you to have to go down there and take care of all that and handle the press as well. I mean, it must have been one of the worst things you've ever had to do.
Yeah, but you know what? There was no question that I would do it. You know, Ted asked me to do it. He asked me to fly to Perth, which I did, and I sat with the family, and they were just finding it difficult. It was a terrible grieving moment for them because he wasn't here. Just on the lighter side, a typical Bond, I'd get all these calls after he died. It was like, "Hi, I'm such and such from Sweden. I'm Bond's girlfriend." And I'd go, "Oh yeah, 1900, 101. He had girlfriends everywhere.
Oh man, Bon. And he actually called you just a week before he passed away, and he was really excited about the new recordings. And I had heard he was sitting behind the drum kit for "Let Me Put My Love Into You" and "Have a Drink on Me" with Angus and Mal in London. And how did that phone call go?
He called me, and it would have only been possibly even a week. It was only about 4 days. And he said, "I've just spent time with Malcolm and Angus." He said, "I can't wait to get into the studio." He said, "You wait till you hear some of their riffs." He said, "They're amazing." And he was really up about it. Now,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what the other part said, that he was behind the drum kit and that. I'm not sure where that fits in. But in his discussion with me, it was just that he'd heard all these new riffs that they were coming up with.
Amazing.
You know, in my mind, I already had him going into the studio. I already had them going into the studio. So
Wow.
to get that call, well, I didn't get the call. George and Harry came in and told me, and I just, no, it can't, because I just spoke to him.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Bon had probably died hundreds of times before in some crazy incident, you know, knowing Bon.
And believe it or not, I never saw that at all, ever.
Really?
Yeah, never. Occasionally the alcohol, occasionally, but never ever saw the other side.
Wow. And you saw some pretty amazing shows with Bon. Did I hear you went over to the Day on the Green festival in Oakland?
I was there. That was in 78. Oh my God, that was amazing.
I bet.
To see them get up that early in the morning, because it was an early show. They opened the day.
Right.
You know, they were still breaking into America at that stage. Just it was really their early days.
Yeah.
And to see Angus get out there in the crowd, and I was standing on the side, and I'm going, "No, be careful. You know, my heart was always in my mouth when they went out in the crowd, because everybody wants to grab them and pull the cord.
Right.
And the crowd lapped them up, absolutely lapped them up.
That's awesome. And of course, as we know, Brian comes in and fills the mighty Bon Scott's shoes, which has never been done, maybe a handful of times in the history of rock and roll. But Brian rises to the challenge. And were you at those big events with Brian, like say Rock in Rio or in Toronto?
I was in Rock in Rio.
Oh, wow.
Oh, and I was also in Moscow when they did the massive show in Moscow.
How many people can say they saw AC/DC with just like a handful of people in the crowd and then a million people in the crowd?
A million plus. The figure has changed between 1.2 and 1.6 in Moscow on the airfield. The stage was so big that, I mean, I was on the side of the stage and I started to feel
scared.
What's the word opposite? The opposite to claustrophobic. All I could see were faces for as far as you could see. You could look to the left, to the right, directly in front, and there was no ending. The faces just went on and on and on. And we had 25,000 National Guard as our security.
25,000?
25,000, yeah, as our security and the militia.
Whoa.
I've always said one of the funniest things for me was they were all singing along with the songs, and we never sold one record in Russia, but they all knew the songs that they sang along with all the words.
Unbelievable.
It was an amazing, amazing show, and they were so receptive. The crowd was just so there for them.
Magic.
It was the same in Rio.
I bet.
Oh my God. I was behind the guys when they went on stage, and the first thing that hit us was body heat. The crowd had been out in the sun all day waiting for the show.
Yeah.
It wasn't a horrible smell. It was an energy, and the energy almost picked you up. I've never felt anything like it in my life. Never felt anything like it. I could feel myself rising.
Wow.
Just with what was happening in the crowd.
Wow. That's incredible. How about the Hall of Fame induction? Were you there?
I was.
Very nice.
It was pretty special.
I was outside the doors. I wasn't allowed in, but I was there listening through the door, and I was like, this is historic. I'm going to be there no matter what.
Well, they got the crowd up, let me tell you.
I bet they did.
They had them all up on their feet.
That's so great. And I love this story, and I'm going to set it up for you. The Rolling Stones tour manager rings you up in Sydney and says, Keith Richards would love to see Malcolm and Angus since the Stones were in town, and wanted to know if they wanted to come to the show. And what was Malcolm's response?
He said, I don't think so. He said, we're in the middle of writing at the moment, he said, and we just like to stay focused. Now, I just go back and say the tour manager used to be our tour manager.
Oh, wow.
He was our original tour manager, and he was now the Stones tour manager. So when he came into town, he called me and he said, the boys in town. That's funny because they both are, because it's not often that the two of them were in town together.
Sure.
So he said, Keith would love them to come to the show. And I thought, oh no, because I was desperate to go. I wanted them to go. But now, he knew. He said, no. So the tour manager said, well, why don't you come down and I'll show you where everything is. And if they decide to come down, he said, they're rehearsing tonight. So I went down and I watched the rehearsal. And Keith, I was just blown away with Keith, as I usually am. And so the next day, I said, what do you think, Mel? I said, do you think you might like to go? Because I thought I'd just try one more time. And he said, Mel, Ang, what do you think? And he said, oh, look, he said, we might come down for a little while. So I rang the tour manager and I said, we're coming. And I got them down there and he showed me, bring them in this way and everything. So anyway, Ronnie Woods came out and he went, oh my God, come on in. Keith wants to see you. So we went in and you're talking to someone who's on the side and I'm sitting there going, is that Marion Faithfull in there as well? So there was Marion Faithfull, there was Keith Richards,
wow.
There was Ronnie and Mick was walking past. And I just feel if I'd been on drugs, I'd be having a flashback. It was just too much going on.
It's like a dream.
And so Angus and Malcolm walk in and they're very, very, quiet as they are normally as people. And Mal said, can we smoke in here, Keith? And Keith, I won't say exactly what he said, but he said, certainly can. And we were walking out because I was getting ready to go in the shower. And Ronnie said, do you want to get up and do a number with us? Right? And Malcolm turned around. He said, let's see how you get on.
I love the balls on that guy. So great.
And so we're walking out and Ronnie says to Angus, we've got guitars and that. And I said, no, they didn't come with any guitar. And he said, oh, Keith said you can take he's got them all there. Take whatever you want. And now you can have whatever you want. So we went out to the desk. The tour manager came up to me. He said, well, they're going to get up. And I said, I've got no idea. Don't know. So we're standing at the desk and the guys are on stage. The Stones are doing their number. And then Mel says, oh, we're just going out for a cigarette. So the two of them went out for a cigarette. And the next minute I hear Mick say, welcome, Malcolm and Angus. The place went nuts.
Oh,
Wow.
I'm in Australia, right?
right.
If you look at Mal when he looks over at Charlie, and Charlie has got a smile on his face it's this big. It was brilliant. I was in awe of the evening. It was one of my highlights of my career.
I love that. I was going to say that must have been a highlight for not only you, but the Young brothers deep down inside, I think. And you made that happen, right?
Well, I asked them if they want to go. It was the fact that the tour manager connected with me.
You were the conduit. Here's a morbid question, but we all have to leave this world. If you were to pick one AC/DC track to play at your own funeral, what would you choose?
My own funeral. Oh, my goodness me. I always relate this one to Bond, and it's only because they put the caption under one of his pictures after he died, but it's a track that I love the feel of. And I think I'd have to say Ride On.
Perfect.
Nice.
Perfect. I love that.
I just love the feel of it. It's just...
After all the success, you took a much-needed break from Albert's, and then sadly, Ted Albert passed away on All Days, your birthday. After his memorial, you received a call from Albert's to become CEO in 1999. At that moment, is this true? You became the very first female rock and roll executive in Australian history?
It was.
That's amazing.
I did come back after my birthday, when Ted died on my birthday, and it was because I genuinely felt there's nobody there to look after my label. I still consider it my label, even though I haven't been there for a couple of years.
Sure.
And so when I came back, they were changing a few things around, but because the CEO was leaving and they wanted me to look after the whole recording division, and they made me CEO. And I wasn't aware at the time, but it's only because I had this Lifetime Achievement Award from APRA that they said, you do realise you're the first female CEO in the music industry, can't be? And so yes, I was.
That's incredible.
So you were awarded the Ted Albert Award for Outstanding Achievement in Australian Music.
I was blown away. I've had a few awards over the years, but that one was pretty special to me. I mean, I admired Ted so much, not just for his talent and being in the industry, but as a person. He had empathy. He had consideration for his staff like I have never seen with anybody else in the industry. And I've worked with every major record label, both locally and internationally. Nobody cared for the staff like he cared for his employees. And he was very respectful. He would talk to a junior in the same way as he'd talk to an executive. He was well brought up. He was incredibly well educated, but he was also very passionate and very understanding. I lost my dad in 1974. I was quite young and really affected by it. And he was so supportive, told me to do what I needed to do. He was there. And, he was like that with everyone, not just with me.
As you know, AC/DC Beyond the Thunder is about how this band has influenced countless people around the globe in truly unique ways. How has AC/DC influenced you, FIFA?
Well, I think watching them do what they do night after night, I've been on many tours over the years, more so in the early part than the latter part. And it wouldn't matter if come rain, hail or snow, those guys would be up there. Even if Bond partied all night the night before, he was always there. He knew to beat. And Malcolm and Angus were so demanding of themselves, their own criticism. Malcolm in particular is such a forward thinker. I mean, Angus is the showman, without question, but Malcolm was like the spine. And don't forget, just because they were famous, well-known in one area, it's not that it necessarily translates to the next one. They have to work from the beginning up again, from the ground back up. In every market they went to, they were really big in Australia, go to the UK, nothing's happening in the UK, so they've got to start from the bottom up there and doing the same in Europe. And they did that. They went on countless tours. I've never seen anyone put in the hard yards that those guys did.
Yeah.
I was really proud.
Well, here's a question we don't get to ask too many guests. How have you influenced AC/DC?
I don't think I have.
Oh, come on now.
I don't think I have. No, I don't. No, genuinely, I don't believe I have. I was really, really very involved in it, really heart and soul. And I remember they came out to do one show, and I looked at the song list, and I said, Mel, I said, you haven't got Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution on. He said, no, we don't do it. And I said, you've got to do it. I said, it was in the charts here. We got it, I don't know if it got to #1, but it got very high up in the charts. I said, you have to do it.
Yeah.
Never in a big fit thinking they would, because you already had the show set up. And so I go out and see the show, and Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution came on.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, so I might have had one little input there.
Good for you.
And also, when they came into town, I made sure that every record shop, every shop that I could would have a front massive poster. I tried to paper each city when they were going to appear, and I worked really well with the promoter. But no, I don't think I influenced them. I think I supported them a lot, and I certainly liaised with all of their record companies, internationally, and all the PR people internationally. But personally, I think that they had their vision. And they had support.
That would be you.
Yeah.
We're celebrating ACDC's 50th anniversary, and our ACDC Beyond the Thunder podcast turns 5 years old, actually. And as you know, Greg and I started the idea for ACDC Beyond the Thunder 15 years ago. So there's a lot of benchmarks here today. After all these years, FIFA, why in the world did you finally agree to sit down with us?
I think it's because, one, you've been persistent.
We learned from you. We learned from the best, FIFA.
And two, because it's 50 years. And I think 50 years is quite an achievement. And to see Angus still up there giving it all,
Yeah.
And he's gone through so much, having lost Malcolm, who
Sure.
they were more like twins than anything else, and, had really high regard for each other. But to see him get out there and to do what he does so well, I mean, he's just amazing. So I thought 50 years is a nice time to have a chat.
It was well worth the wait, FIFA. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for sitting with us.
I wanted to ask you real quick before we let you go. I wanted to discuss the Nordoff Robbins charity that you were a part of for 10 years that we also, our listeners, donate to. So listeners, please keep donating to our favorite charities. Can you tell us a little bit about why they should donate?
Well, I was a founder member of Nordoff Robbins here, and this is over 20-odd years ago. They told us what they were doing in America, and so we thought it'd be a good thing to do here. So we started Nordoff Robbins here in Australia, and I honestly cannot tell you how amazing it is to see the work that they do and the work that we've been able to help and provide to a lot of people who would not be able to afford this, and people that are locked in their own little world because of autism or, mental illness, and to see these kids come alive, not just kids, adults as well. And it's grown over the years, and we've been able to get a lot of support within the industry.
Yeah.
It's absolutely stunning.
Powerful.
We do a lot to try and support them here in Australia. And I know they've got around the world, and they're doing an amazing job.
That's right, listeners. If you too would like to support the Nordoff Robbins Music Therapy and Make-A-Wish Foundations, 100% of those profits goes directly to those deserving causes. So after the show, simply go to beyondthethunder.com or acdcpodcast.org and hit the charity button. Donate as little as $1. That's less than a cup of coffee. And we may just call your name out on the show, like Eric Mingy, Hendrik Cordes, and Remy Andre Unvik. Greg, Eric, and I support you, and we salute you and the ACDC Beyond the Thunder community for leaning in. That's beyondthethunder.com. Hit the charity button, and that's it. We have to thank you so much for celebrating this monumental occasion with us and our listeners. So thank you for joining us all the way from Sydney, Australia, and regaling us with some epic and electrifying flashbacks, but most importantly, for being one of the key ingredients for making this magic thing called ACDC 50 years later. And thank you for being so ball-breakingly sweet, FIFA. Our final question for you today, Miss Riccobono, is a good one. If you had to say one word to the boys to sum up their 50-year career in rock and roll, what would your one word be?
Awesome.
There it is. ACDC Beyond the Thunder theme song, Trailer Trash, written and performed by Gannon Arnold. VO talent by Bruce Jacobson. Cinematography and sound recording by Greg Ferguson. Edited and mixed by Eric Keel. Written, directed, and hosted by Kurt Squires. Produced by Greg Ferguson, Eric Keel, and Kurt Squires. ACDC Beyond the Thunder is a Squires LLC current motion production. Copyright Beyond the Thunder podcast, all rights reserved. This has been a Nat Attack presentation.
Shazbot Nanu Nana.
FIFA Riccobono.
FIFA Riccobono.
It's FIFA Riccobono.
Riccobono,
Okay.
I think. I've had to practice this a lot.
We're going to keep this part in for sure.
That would be awesome. Riccobino.
Be like the sound of the
Riccobono.
the bum, the dumb.
Hey, you just said it right, by the way.
Riccobono.
Yes.
Okay.